On this episode of the Red and Gold Report, we're going to be answering two questions coming out of the Chiefs' victory against the Houston Texans. Number one, who pulled us to victory in this game? And number two, what happened that allowed the league's worst team to take this game into overtime? Let's start with the first question. Who pulled us to victory in this game? Well, Jerick Stinkin' McKinnon had another great day. He averaged 5.2 yards on the ground. He added another 70 yards through the air. He had both the Chiefs' first and last touchdowns in the game. He looks fast and determined. It's very exciting to see him coming on at the end of the season here. Mahomes also had a solid outing. He had a stretch late in the game where he completed 19 passes in a row. 19 passes in a row. He finished with 336 yards and two touchdowns, zero interceptions. He also ran for a touchdown and had a very well timed 14-yard scamper for a first down to keep that drive going late in the fourth quarter it should have ended the game had we not had that missed field goal, which we're going to come back to. And he was particularly able to pick on the Texans linebackers, who allowed him to hit 23 of 24 targets for 200 yards just against their linebackers. Travis Kelce also had a good day. He had 10 catches, 105 yards, which just another day at the office for him. But two interesting things about the game for him. He caught all 10 passes thrown his direction, which is huge. And also, Kelce, during the game, jumped over Shannon Sharpe to become the fourth all-time tight end in receiving yards in the NFL all time. So congrats to Kelce. Also, wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster had a similar day. He had 88 yards, sure, yes, but like Kelce, he caught all 10 passes thrown his way, which is great. Over on defense, linebacker Nick Bolton had 7 tackles, 2 quarterback hits, and led the team on defense. Coming into the game, he was tied for 5th in the league for most tackles by anybody, and it's good to finally see him starting to get some attention nationally. People are voting for him for the Pro Bowl, and it's very well deserved. Defensive end Carlos Dunlap had a quietly nice game. Not spectacular, but solid. He twice tipped passes at the line of scrimmage and twice hit Houston Texan quarterbacks. And also, rookie Trent McDuffie. Just watch him. Watch him on some plays. He had a great outing. Look, he's a guy who I think he might always be under the radar because he's smaller and because he might never register like a ton of interceptions. It's not the main component of his game. But watch him play. On 32 coverage snaps, he only allowed one catch. One catch on the day. And now, with 8 starts for this season, because he was hurt a bit, but with 8 starts, he has only allowed 158 yards of receiving. That's absolutely incredible. He was a steal towards the back half of that first round in the draft. So those are the guys that really pulled us through to a victory in this kind of weird game. But that brings me to our second question. Now, some people, they might dismiss this, saying, hey, a win is a win. It's the NFL. Be happy with the win. And I am, and it is. But the playoffs are just weeks away. And we just about got beat in overtime by the team that's the worst in the NFL, like clearly the worst. And last week, we beat the hapless Broncos by less than a touchdown. And the week before that, we lost to the Bengals again. So, yeah, I think there's some fair concern here. And well, it's just weird because in this game, Patrick Mahomes, get this, he completed 88% of his passes. He threw no interceptions. The running backs were averaging 5.5 yards a carry. We moved the ball over 500 yards on offense. And yet, well, we just about lost to the worst team in the league in overtime. So what in the world is up with that? Well, sure. We had some smaller issues, like our defensive ends were losing contain. But really, this is about some of the big problems that keep raising their ugly heads during the season. Turnovers, special teams play. Let's start with the turnovers. Well, we gave away the ball on 2 fumbles this week. It was the 8th game this year where the Chiefs lost the turnover differential, where we had more giveaways than we had takeaways, which is stunning for a team that's 11-3. You just don't see that very often. And here's why this is such a problem. The Texans scored touchdowns on both of the drives following those fumbles. So our offense is struggling as they give the ball away this season. And our defense is just plain not taking the ball away. I mean, they had 0 takeaways against one of the worst offenses in the league. So here we sit, 5th worst in giveaways and the bottom half of the league in takeaways. And it's just a problem. It's just a problem. This takeaway issue has become a real problem. But then there's special teams. Yeah, Harrison Butker is missing more kicks this season than any other season in his career. He had an extra point miss at the end of that second quarter. And of course, he had the miss at the end of the game that would have won the game in regulation, wouldn't have needed overtime. He just missed 2 kicks. You can't miss 2 kicks in a game for an 11-3 team. But there was also on special teams the holding during a return that meant that our offense had to start overtime drive on the 9-yard line. Like, that's some real special team problems. And special teams have just been really bad this year. These 2 problems of turnover differential and bad special teams play nearly ended in a loss against the league's worst team. Combine that with the third problem we've often faced this season, very poor offensive tackle play in the passing game. And this means that while the Chiefs have the best quarterback, the best interior offensive line, the best defensive tackle in the entire league, while the Chiefs have running backs that are really turning it on late in the season, while the Chiefs have an all-pro linebacker, while the Chiefs have emerging young corners, even with all of that in mind, these flaws, honestly, they leave me worried about the playoffs unless they're cleaned up. Yes, we have some of the best players in the entire NFL, but man, these flaws could sink our chances if we don't get them in order before the playoffs come. But with those 2 questions out of the way, I have to address something else, and it's the refs. Look, I know every time I say anything about the refs, people get mad. I get comments, I'm whining, and that every fan wants calls to go their team's way. But that's not what I'm saying. Instead, what I'm saying is that NFL officiating has become so inconsistent that it's rendering entire parts of the game arbitrary and at times unwatchable. And to prove I'm not just whining for my Chiefs, let me point out that the way I was watching the game, the refs missed a pass interference call that should have gone Houston's way in the third quarter. The refs also failed to be in any sort of decent position to see that fumble and ensuing scrum at the end of the game. And even as a Chiefs fan, on that play, I have to admit, if I was a Texans fan, I would be fuming at the refs. So to be clear, I'm not just saying the refs have it out for my team. I don't think that that's true. Instead, I think they're incompetent. I'm saying that NFL officiating is broken because it is inconsistent and arbitrary. So while just weeks ago, this same officiating crew called a massive penalty on Chris Jones for kind of landing on a quarterback who still had the ball during a sack, he couldn't have avoided it. They call a penalty on that. Well, in this game, the same referees missed a play when a Houston defender just plain punched Mahomes in the face mask after he threw the ball. And another one where a defender was whipping Mahomes around and slammed his head into the turf after he'd already released the ball. Okay? That's inconsistency, and you can't have that in professional sport as these refs go out there. And then there was a stretch in the third quarter, it just became a joke. McKinnon got called for a blindside block, even though the defender saw him coming and the defender knocked McKinnon on the ground. Then the refs missed a face mask penalty against Pacheco. Then the refs called an illegal contact hit on Thornhill after the wide receiver ran into him, not the other way around. And I'm sorry, that's just incompetence. In the modern NFL, the refs are being asked to do too much. Way too much. Would you want to be an NFL ref? I wouldn't. I mean, what's roughing the passer at this point? Do you have any idea? I have no clue what's going to get called for roughing the passer or not. What's a hit on a defenseless receiver? What's going to be called for head-to-head contact? Nobody knows the answers to these questions. And at times, it's destroying the ability for those of us watching the game to feel like, the result or the game itself isn't soiled by incompetent, arbitrary, inconsistent refs. Okay, I'm done with my rant. I'm sorry. But what do you think? Do you think the refs are as bad as I make them out to be these days? Do you think there's a different problem? Well, let me know in the comments. What's your take on the balance between this week being happy that we won, but also maybe a touch worried that we went into overtime with Houston of all teams? And what do you think about the upcoming Seattle game? How do you think our defense is going to fare against Geno Smith and Seattle? Leave me your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, all those good things. Thanks for watching, and go Chiefs.